child amputees in history.
Why is Miss Rachel focusing so much on Gaza when there are Israeli children who've been taken hostage too, children in Israel who've been murdered too, and it's like, well, because of the numbers.
I hadn't watched it up until a couple days ago. Lindsay Ellis went and came back to making YouTube videos after a long time away from producing content, and came out with a video that was specifically, while it is, you know, worded about Miss Rachel, about genocide, and speaks about a lot of things. It's 2 hours long. It goes into the history of the persecution of the Jewish people. It goes into the history of what real anti-Semitism is, and how to identify actual anti-Semitism, and how the majority of anti-Semitic rhetoric, as well as violent attacks, is being done almost exclusively by the far right. And then what fake anti-Semitism is, and how Israel, Christian Zionists, Democrats and Republicans alike, usually people who are directly impacted and funded by AIPAC, have been twisting and manipulating and distorting and perverting the term anti-Semitism specifically to try and associate anything that Israel does with all Jewish people, and anyone who criticizes Israel as then having committed an act of anti-Semitism itself. Her video is incredible, especially coming at a time right now when I know there was a lot of discussion surrounding the fact that some of these so-called breadtubers, the biggest names in leftist content production, and breadtube being this, you know, association, loosely associated group of YouTubers who back in the day kind of were associated together because they were in a subreddit that was promoting some of their work and stuff like that. Well, a lot of the superstars that came out of the so-called breadtube movement, whether that be H-Bomb, ContraPoints, Abigail of PhilosophyTube, etc., have been mostly either very silent on this, or when they are advocates or speaking about this in other social media forums, you know, they have deleted a lot of their tweets, or in the case of ContraPoints, eventually coming out and making a statement about how no one really wants to see a ContraPoint style video about something like this because it's something so serious. And at the same time, while she can acknowledge that Israel's committing a genocide, the real concerns that she had were surrounding the rise of anti-Semitism on the left, and the loss of an election seemed to be of a bigger concern to her than what was actively being done to the, you know, mass massacring of children in the Gaza Strip and stuff like that. To the fact that, you know, Abigail and PhilosophyTube have, she's basically said nothing on the subject on social media in terms of posting about it, and she doesn't seem to be making a lot of content on it. People said that there was a Patreon exclusive video that you could see that mentions it a little bit, but that's not really for the general consumption of the people. And then she also just recently came out with a video about colonialism, indigenous genocide in the history of America that invokes or speaks a little bit about the genocide of Palestinians, but does so in a very, very short little blurb at the very end, in which he puts genocide in quotation marks, which seems grotesque at this point, you know, stating that some people have said that, you know, this is equivalent to the genocide that is taking place to Palestinians in Palestine, you know, that kind of stuff where you're just like, wait, what the fuck? You can absolutely draw parallels, especially when it comes to settler colonialism and the ongoing persecution of Palestinians on their own land. It's not something you need to simply imply some people say, and then proceeded to start talking about anti-Semitism, the problems with anti-Semitism, and how, you know, it's very, very important for us to center that when having these kind of discussions. So once again, the biggest names that you would expect to see from the world of breadtube have been either silent, mostly silent, or just honestly, unbelievably, depressingly unable to discuss this topic for a variety of reasons. It would seem, you know, that they have their own, either they on some level are, you know, neoliberals or liberals who do want to maintain a order or a world order, one that could materially be benefiting them, or one in which they see the, you know, the benevolence of the West being superior to perhaps other forms of, you know, potential world orders that could arise if there was a multipolar world or other dynamics or something like that, whatever the case may be. Yes, there's obviously examples in the complete opposite direction of really big names from the breadtube era who have made outstanding videos on the subject. Sean, Big Joel, Thoughtslime, etc., have all, you know, put out and released very, very well researched and great videos on this topic. A lot of creators who are considered part of Cornbread Tube have been outspoken about this and making videos on and content on this for a very, very long time, and obviously have been putting what is considered breadtube to shame in that regard. But it does feel like something that is profoundly sad, where it happens to be probably, you know, the most live streamed genocide in our lifetimes, where the amount of evidence and the reality of what is taking place is so crystal clear. Like, you have to have been working consciously to ignore how bad things are and how vile the atrocities are for a variety of your own reasons. Maybe you live in a part of the world like myself, like Canada, where you don't really want to have to accept the reality that a colonial genocidal nation like Canada, that is actively involved in the oppression of Indigenous people within our own borders, would be capable of materially supporting Israel as it commits this genocide, when the front-facing liberals who have been in power here for so long are trying to say all these nice things, like, oh, no, we have stopped selling arms to Israel. No, we didn't. We did not only did we try to find loopholes to be able to continue to do that, such as, hey, we're not selling them weapons, we're selling them like missile guidance systems. Well, okay, we're not even selling them that anymore. We're selling them to America, who sells it to them. So, I mean, if America wants to do that, we're washing our hands of the whole thing. Turns out that wasn't even the truth. It turns out we're actually literally selling bullets. Hundreds of thousands of bullets have been manufactured by Canadian arm manufacturers and have been shipped off to Israel while this genocide was taking place. And they were just openly denying or lying it. And now they've been trying to downplay the severity of that. So Canada is a genocidal nation, as is France, as is Germany, as is the UK, as a lot of these European imperial Western powers are. Well, they're also trying to take a step back and be like, well, you know what, but we're also offering to possibly, maybe, with terms and conditions, recognize the state of Palestine in the future. All this is taking place. I wasn't expecting a video like the one that Lindsay Ellis made to come out, but I highly recommend watching it, not just because she does it in her style, in the same way that Big Joel did his videos on the subject in his style, in the same way that Thought Slime did his video in their style. Like, all these people are doing their videos in their particular. It's not as if it's just like, oh, this is completely different. I've never seen a video like this by Lindsay Ellis. No, it is still Lindsay Ellis doing what she does really well, which is, of course, extensive research and reading and you know, deep historical dives into a topic to give everything context, but really explains, and perhaps for people who aren't totally aware of how this all works, how nations around the world have allowed and embedded genocides, even if they themselves feel that they're not directly involved in it. And what she ties this all together with is the Rwandan genocide, another genocide that took place in our lifetimes, another genocide in which a lot of people in the West maybe felt that they weren't directly or even indirectly responsible for, because at the end of the day, you know, this was being done by the Hutus and the Tutsis, and these were two different opposing factions that were both in Rwanda, that were, you know, obviously there was power dynamics at play, there was all that kind of stuff, but it's not as if the West had any real involvement, and that's absolutely not true. I mean, it used to be a country that was colonized by Germany, and you know, Germany being what it was, not being interested in actually having an active Germans on the ground colonial project taking place in the same way that they had done in other parts of the world, decided that they wanted to bestow the idea of having that country be run by an elite class by putting that on a minority faction of people that had been separated into these two groups, which was, again, there wasn't a race or racial difference that existed between the two groups, but leave it to the Belgians, who then took over the ownership and control of Rwanda after the Germans to instill all this super bizarre race science. And they were really effective at that, at basically saying that there was actually, scientific reasons if we were to measure skulls and measure nose shapes and look at the phrenology of both the differences between the Hutus and the Tutsis, we can see that one actually happens to be a superior race. No, this is not a biblical thing all the way dating back to Noah or something like that, even though that this kind of does have its origins in that. But this actually has to do a lot with how one is more of a divine race, and then the other one should be actually ruling over the other one as a result of all this, which eventually leads to a huge amount of animosity and hatred between these two groups, especially when one of those groups happens to have a larger majority population. All of this is taking place, and when the superpowers, the colonial powers, when they kind of step away from those countries, when they've been liberated because of a world war, because it's too expensive, because of this colonial project not existing, or because that there is emancipation or decolonization that takes place, then once they've kind of taken a step back, they start to feel, well, I'm not responsible for that anymore. Like, sure, we did instill all of this genocidal race science in that country, and we did teach that, and then now it's being reinforced, and we did kind of set up the system of apartheid where there was separate systems of power and structure between these two groups, and now it's getting to a point where these two groups are actively fighting each other, and because, you know, that there is a broadcast on the radio where people are being told of their own kind to try and, you know, massacre this other group in that country, well, I mean, that's them massacring themselves. We can't really take a part in this because there's not sufficient international pressure or outrage or action taken even though these countries may have been involved at one point or another, then all of a sudden it's that kind of conditions that allow for genocide to take place. And the Rwandan genocide, one that has kind of unfortunately been lost to history because not a lot of people talk about it, it's a very fascinating case because, well, no, it is not the largest scale genocide, not that we should be ranking genocides in order of how many people died in them, but it was the fastest. It was the fastest one that took place, and it was also one in which it was directly inspired through the mass propagandation of hate speech that was being done through radio waves, where people were being told in their own homes, you have to take action against this inferior race. You have to get out. If you are a Hutu and you have access to a knife or a bat or a machete or even anything in your home, you need to grab that weapon, get into the streets, and kill every Tutsi that you see. Because if we don't kill them, and that worked. That worked until there was just massacres, very, very personal ones, up close, being done mostly with machetes. That was the primary weapon of that genocide, where there were hundreds of thousands of people running into the streets and massacring hundreds of thousands of other people. And it is, of course, something that is just unbelievably fucked up and one that shocks the conscience, as Pete Buttigieg would say, and all this kind of stuff. But the things that lead up to it, and a lot of the things that took place in terms of mass dehumanization, years and years of it, in fact, which of course leads to the grouping of an other, where people can justify violent acts towards them, incitements to violence. You can see parallels between this and a lot of other genocides that have taken place, especially when it comes to basically colonial occupations, imperial occupations, and in the case of, what Israel has been doing to Palestine for years and years and years, and our indoctrination as a society, and our dehumanization as a society towards the Palestinian people for so long, where people didn't even question this. It was not considered a weird thing to have a mayoral debate in the United States that has nothing to do with Israel or Palestine, where one of the biggest, if not the key questions, came down to, do you support Israel's right to exist and Israel's right to be a Jewish supremacist ethno-state? This stuff is being asked even though the majority of the Jewish voters in districts in New York ended up voting for Zoran Mamdani, and it is supporting Zoran Mamdani. And all of these Christian Zionists and Christian nationalists in the United States around the entire U.S. were the ones freaking out about that election, about the potential now for a Muslim to come into power, and them all saying, well, you know what? This means that it's going to be the mass death of people in New York, especially the Jews. They were posting 9/11 footage. They were posting fucking all this racist ass shit, being like, once a Muslim comes into power, it's going to be the massacre of the Jewish people. It's Muslims versus Jews. Muslims versus Jews. This is as old as time. And she actually goes through, going back to Lindsay Ellis' video, through the history of it, being like, that's not actually a historical thing. You know who has been persecuting the Jews throughout history? The Christians, the Crusaders, the Europeans, the Romans. These are the groups who have been persecuting and mass murdering and massacring Jewish people throughout history. Well, at the same time, the modern Christian nationalist movement in the United States and its association with Republicans and the far right and this entire indoctrination that they've been doing for so long have been pushing this idea that it's Muslims who are anti-civilization, it's Muslims who are anti-Western, it's Muslims who are evil, who are basically fundamentally the worst group possible, and it's Muslims who are a threat to every Jewish person and their existence, and especially the nation of Israel. And that's why they do and try to enforce and reinforce a lot of the horrifying behaviors that they're doing, and how much this all plays out. I don't think I've seen someone contextualize and put this all together in a way that is both entertaining, easy to digest, and you can share with your friends. In one way, I'm both saying you should go watch and definitely share Lindsay Ellis's new video, because you could give it to someone and just say, hey, this is about, the persecution of a child's entertainer and why that's weird. And that's enough for someone to take it off as a jumping off point. But to sit through the entire thing and realize, once it's been contextualized, how destructive a force the Christian nationalist movement is in the United States, and that these are not Christians. I want to be completely clear. Evangelical Christians, the Christian nationalist movement, all of them, they are actually in direct violation of the tenets of Christianity. not only are they in violation of the tenets of Christianity and the teachings of the New Testament, for example, they have distorted a lot of the teachings of their religion in the same way they are demanding the distortion of other religions. She pulls up quotes from the Quran and quotes from the Talmud to be able to explain that this is not a fundamental principle, the existence of Israel, in the scriptures of the writings, of Jewish scholars and stuff like that. In the same way, for Muslims and for Muslim scholars, the idea of eradicating the Jewish people or targeting the Jewish people or trying to murder the Jewish people is also not a part of their teachings or is part of the Quran or part of something they're fundamentally trying to fulfill. This is, again, a Christian nationalist, Christian Zionist movement that have been pushing for this kind of stuff. And at its core, it is because a lot of these people are part of an apocalyptic death cult. And I don't use those terms lightly. But all of them have, throughout history, believed, whether it be in the history of the Crusades, whether that be in the history of the persecution of various ethnicities or groups, or even in their complete ethnic cleansing of certain demographics and stuff like that, they have always felt that they were on the verge of a prophecy being fulfilled, a prophecy that does find itself in the Bible, because the Bible, it does say that there will be a return of Jesus. He's going to return to the earth. He's going to take a select few, and those select few will be brought and ushered back into heaven. Well, at the same time, the requirements and the setup for this entire apocalyptic event, which will spell the end of earth as we know it and civilization, requires God's chosen people to be in a certain part of the world at a certain part of time before these events can take place. And so we need to set all this kind of stuff up. And a lot of these people are now in power in the United States. From your Mike Huckabees to even the hucksters who pretend to believe in this and might not even care two fucks about it, but they're all pushing the same rhetoric and they're all pushing the same kind of apocalyptic death cult biblical prophecy, while at the same time trying to manipulate various groups, including Jewish people, to try and be a part of these projects, these mass death projects, these mass death cults, the danger that all of this kind of stuff has. And the truly sad thing about it all is that a lot of the writings that you will find in both the similarities of, say, like, because a lot of these things were written upon, their plagiarisms, if you will, okay? A lot of the three monotheistic religions, whether it be, Christianity and then, Islam afterwards and all this kind of stuff, they're written after and taking parts from other parts of other religions. For example, that's why characters like Jesus appear in the Quran. But both in the Talmud and the Quran are very similar messaging. In the Talmud, there's a saying that I'm sure you've all heard from Schindler's List: to save one life is to save all of humanity. And in the Quran, there's a similar message: to kill one person is to kill all of humanity. In both cases, trying to say that it is both sacred and holy and something that one should do if they happen to be a religious figure, to try and save everybody or to try and protect everybody. But these things are not brought up often in these kind of discussions. It's typically discussions surrounding, at the end of the day, we have to admit that, like, Sharia law is really intense, right? At the end of the day, we have to admit that a lot of these people, they seem to be pretty aggressive. They're trying to do jihad and kill us all. So, I think if Muslims arrive into your country, they're going to cause mass violence and mass death and all those kind of things. It's all part of a broader dehumanization project. It has been for a very long time, to continue to dehumanize people. That's why you're seeing people throwing weird, violent, images at Zoran Mamdani right now of pictures of bacon frying and being like, ha, bite appetit or bite appetat or whatever the person said. Zoran, how do you like this? And, he had the best response to it. It's like, yeah, we're not vampires, so this isn't garlic. And what are you trying to do here? The people who threaten Muslims with meat, being like, ha, you'll never be able to withstand the power of my bacon. I think that those are the exact same people who, if you were to tell them, there's no war on Christmas, you know that, right? They would lose their shit. They'd be like, what? There is a war on Christmas!
Thank you so much for watching, everyone. This video wouldn't be at all possible without the financial support of all the people whose names you see on the screen right now. And if you want to unlock secret bonus episodes, content that we can't post anywhere else, or get the videos early before anyone else gets to see them, please go on to patreon.com/theserfs. For as little as $1, you can help support this channel and help make more videos like this possible. Our executive producers are Anna Loves Riley, Adrian McCarthy, Bobby Lasers, Cheryl Alvarez, Comrade Junkie, Doug Caddy, Everything Important, Garrett Sandoval, Hagbard Celine, Jimmy Sombrero, Multimondi, Omni, Political Papi, Preston Kroll, Quiet 185, Richard Boehm, Riley and Anna, Roller Dragon, Cernicus, Stellar Gwyn, Sebastian Demel, Tigwick, Trav, and Words Greenwood. And also, it wouldn't be possible without all the names you see on the screen right now.